Good morning, grade fives. It is that time of the day again. It is English. I hope that you slept well, that you're ready to start the day. Wherever you are in the country, I hope the weather is beautiful. My side, it is sunny. Looking outside, it's not that windy. It's a beautiful day, so I'm enjoying the sunshine while I can because I know that winter is on its way. But I hope that you're all doing well. So before we start this lesson, I read a joke. And I love lame jokes. And so, are you ready? I'm going to share my joke with you. And it's actually got to do with English. Okay, so why are fish so smart? Because they live in schools. Yes, I do laugh at my own jokes. But for those of you that maybe went straight over your head, because that's most of the time happens to me, the collective noun for fish is a school of fish. So they're so smart because they live in schools. All right, I think that's enough of me being silly. Let's start our lesson today. Remember that this lesson is brought to you by WorksheetCloud, and if you've got any questions, please email them to grade5@worksheetcloud.com. Okay, now today, boys and girls, we are actually specifically going to be looking at different reading strategies. Now remember, I've said this to you before, is I want you to continuously think outside the box. And so that's why in my previous lesson, it was all about inferencing, reading between the lines, thinking, using your own knowledge, looking at clues, and then drawing conclusions from those two components. Now, today we are looking at different reading strategies, and the purpose of them, again, is to slowly develop your skills in English, because I'm very passionate about skills. Skills are one of those things that the moment that you learn your skills and you know how to do something, you can then take those skills and apply it in any subject, actually, in absolutely any subject. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. Different components of today you probably would have seen already in school, or you're going to see in school. So what I mean by that is, let's have a look at the objectives. Today we're going to be looking at different pieces of work, and Leia, sorry, my dog's barking. Today we're going to be looking at different pieces of work, and with every piece of work that we're going to be looking at, we are going to be looking at various sort of viewpoints of that piece of work. So for the first piece of work, we are going to identify what the author's purpose is. The second piece of work, or shall I say text, we're going to look at possible connections, then inferencing again, question, prediction, and summarize. Okay, so those are the different reading strategies that we're going to look at today, because it is so important that when you read a piece or a text, you need to think, okay, what is the purpose of this text? What is it trying to tell me? What am I learning and gaining from this particular text? Right, and so it is very important. And that is what we are doing today. Always remember that when you read, you have to think. You don't just read and it just goes through one eye and out the other. If you want to absorb it, you want to think about it, you want to learn, because reading, you learn from reading. Okay. Right, so we're going to start off with the first one, and the first one is all about author's purpose. So I'm going to read this piece of text with you. It says, "I know you are super busy, but can you please help me with the math homework today? You are so good at math, and I'm really having trouble. Plus, if you help me today, I will help you with your book report next week. Also, my mom made these totally yummy cookies today, and we can have some while we are working." Right. So short and sweet. I'm going to read it one more time. And for the second time as I'm reading it, I want you to try and think about what you think the author's purpose was when they wrote this particular text. There's a reason or a purpose why this author wrote this particular piece, and it's important to identify that, because it's important to know what the purpose of what you're reading is, because then you know how to respond to the theme of the text. Right, so I'm going to read it again, and I want you to think about the purpose. "I know you are super busy, but can you please help me with the math homework today? You are so good at math, and I'm really having trouble. Plus, if you help me today, I will help you with your book report next week. Also, my mom made these totally yummy cookies today, and we can have some while we are working. Right. So, have you given it a bit of thought? What is the author's purpose? And how do you know? Also, always remember in English, whenever you get a question, you should always be able to give an explanation to the answer of that particular question. And that explanation has either got to do with clues from the text or with inferencing. Right. So I hope that you've thought about it, what the author's particular purpose is. And I just want to give you a clue before I reveal the answer. So in this particular text, the two things that stick out for me is that this person is asking for help. We know that. Then they are saying that if you help me, I will help you with your report. Plus, also, if you help me, I can also give you some cookies that my mother just baked and they're fresh and delicious. Okay, so those are the three things that really stood out to me. And when I look at all of those things and I combine them all together, immediately, if I think about the author's purpose, his purpose was to persuade the audience. Right. It was a text about persuasion. And so the person speaking, or the person in the text, was asking the other individual to help, and if you help me, I'll do this and I'll do this. So it's almost like a power of persuasion. And so that was the author's purpose for that particular text, was to show a persuasive text and how an individual can be persuasive. Right. Did you notice that it was short and sweet? And remember that in absolutely anything, there is a purpose for everything, whether it's an advert, whether it is a text, whether it is a comic strip, there's a purpose or theme that runs throughout that, and it is important to identify it. Okay, so that was the first one, author's purpose. The second one that we are going to look at today is all about connections. This for me is one of my favorites, and you'll see in a minute why. Now, let's have a look at this particular text. Are you ready? Kyle was riding his bike home when a squirrel suddenly ran right in front of him. Kyle slammed on his brakes to avoid hitting the squirrel and lost control of his bike. He ended up crashing into the side of the path. The fall hurt a lot, and Kyle got pretty scraped up. Both knees and his arm were bleeding, but he didn't break anything and he didn't hit the squirrel. Right. Now my question to you, and this is where connections come into play, is what does this story remind you of from your own life? So now, do you see that now we start to make connections, that as we read a piece, it starts to sort of bring up a memory of something that potentially either happened to us personally, or we saw, or maybe we heard a story that somebody else was explaining, that maybe something happened to them. And so English is powerful in the way that it can formulate connections between you personally to that of the text, or with that of the text. I'm going to read it one more time. And as I'm reading it, even if you're closing your eyes while you're listening to me, I want you to, not only do you visualize poor little Kyle, but maybe as you're closing your eyes, a memory of maybe you have fallen off your bike when you were smaller, or maybe recently, or maybe it wasn't a bike, maybe you were skateboarding or rollerblading, or if you happen to be like me and you try and attempt teaching hurdles, and as you jump over a hurdle you pop your knee and tear a ligament in your knee. True story, because that's immediately what I thought of when I was reading this story. I'm sure you're going to sort of think of connections, right? So let me read. Kyle was riding his bike home when a squirrel suddenly ran right in front of him. Kyle slammed on his brakes to avoid hitting the squirrel and lost control of his bike. He ended up crashing onto the side of the path. The fall hurt a lot, and Kyle got pretty scraped up. Both knees and his arms were bleeding. but he didn't break anything and he didn't hit a squirrel. Okay, what does the story remind you of from your own life? And boys and girls, maybe pause the video, go and tell somebody at home, and mom, dad, brother, sister, granny, grandpa, whoever is at your house, tell them the story. Oh, do you remember when this and this happened? And oh, do you remember this? Because forming those connections, it's always nice to sort of relate to the text. The more that you relate, the more in depth you're able to explain using English language to a higher degree, right? So this particular answer is your own answer because everybody's going to have their own connections. They're going to have their own stories. And you will find in English a lot of questions, whether it's poetry, whether it's comprehensions, whether it's any visual literacy, questions do pop up where they ask your own answer and give reasons for your answer or your own opinions, for example. And it's important to understand the power of connections. Right, the third one that we're going to look at is something that all of you should be familiar with, is inferencing. Now, I wonder who of you can remember the equation that I spoke about in the previous inferencing lesson. So remember, it's what I read, so it's the clues that I find, plus what I know equals what I infer, and the conclusions that I can make by reading, looking for clues, using my knowledge, putting the two together, and then what I infer. Okay, so the text is as follows. Jake and Tim sat quietly next to each other, each thinking his own thoughts. Suddenly, the pole Jake was holding loosely in his hands jerked so hard he nearly dropped it. "You got one!" exclaimed Tim excitedly. "Reel him in slowly." Right, now the question I'm going to pose to you. What did Jake have? How do you know? Now remember, because this is inferencing, that means that the text doesn't directly tell me what the answer is. I have to read between the lines. Okay, now I'm going to read it again one more time, and immediately I want you to try and think about what does Jake have and what is the evidence. So when I say how do you know, what evidence is there from the story, plus combining that with your knowledge that will give you the answer to the question. Right. Jake and Tim sat quietly next to each other, each thinking his own thoughts. Suddenly, the pole Jake was holding loosely in his hands jerked so hard he nearly dropped it. "You got one!" exclaimed Tim excitedly. "Reel him in slowly." Right. Ready for the answer? I'm sure most of you have got this. And the answer is Jake had a fish on his fishing pole line. And the reason why we know this is because firstly, Tim said, "You got one," and reel him in. So the action of reeling is a verb. To be able to reel, it's a verb. And when we talk about reeling something in, it's always related, or should I say mostly related to fishing. And so this is what we can infer. Right, all of you should know inferencing already. Okay, moving on to the next one. Okay, questioning. So questioning is important because in English we have the good old question words: what, how, when, why, who, and so on. Okay, so our questioning is always so important. Now, before I talk about this particular reading strategy, let's look at the text. Dahlia sat in her seat, more scared than she had ever been in her life. The motor was so loud that everyone had to shout. Her eyes were glued to the open door where one after another, her classmates had all jumped into the clear blue sky. She could feel the weight of the parachute on her back as she slowly walked to the door to take her turn. Wonder what's going on there. Okay, so the questions that I have to ask you. What questions could you ask about this paragraph? If I gave you this just as is, and I don't say anything, and you read it for the first time, you should question. Ask questions, and there's various different types of questions that you can ask using your different question words. Right. You can formulate a question of a what question. What was she doing? Obviously, with a little bit more detail. Who was she with? Her classmates. How many classmates was she with? And so on. Okay. Now, what she's doing, it says she could feel the weight of the parachute on her back as she slowly walked to the door to make her turn. Now, again, it's inferring what is she doing. I'm going to read this again. Let's infer and let's sort of come up with possible questions. Now, remember, we don't have to answer the questions. We are not looking for the answer to the questions. This skill is formulating questions ourselves. It's getting us to think about what we are reading. Right, I'm going to read it again. Dahlia sat in her seat, more scared than she had ever been in her life. The motor was so loud that everyone had to shout. Her eyes were glued to the open door where one after another her classmates had all jumped into the clear blue sky. She could feel the weight of the parachute on her back as she slowly walked to the door to take her turn. Okay, so what I'm inferring, because I see the word parachute and it says she slowly walked to the door, I know it's very loud, they're opening up the door, they're talking about a clear blue sky. I am concluding that she is about to do some skydiving, which is something, I won't lie, it's on my bucket list. I've always wanted to skydive. I haven't yet done it, so one day I will. So she must be very scared, as I would be as well. So what sort of questions could we ask about this paragraph? So I would ask, why was Dahlia learning to skydive? Was it on her bucket list? Was it something that she had always wanted to do? What would happen if she did not jump? So if she, all of a sudden, she got to the door and she decided, I can't do this anymore, what would happen? Right. Do you think somebody would have just pushed her out of the airplane? Do you think she would have just sat down and the airplane would have gone and landed? What other types of questions? Here I've asked a why question, a what question. We can say a when question in terms of the time of day that she was jumping. When was she jumping? What was the occasion that she was jumping? Was it maybe her birthday? Maybe somebody got her a birthday gift of skydiving. Who all was she jumping with? I know it said her classmates, but were the classmates friends of hers? Possibly. Because it was classmates, was it a school outing? That's also something that I'm going to infer and I'm going to ask questions. So there's so many questions, and I want you all actually to go back, pause the video, rewind, and go back and sit with a pen and paper, and I want you to formulate your own questions using those question words. Why, what, how, when, and so on. Okay, just remember that the more you do, the more you practice, the more confident you're going to get in English. Okay, moving on to prediction. So prediction is, for those of you that enjoy your science, and you've also been learning a lot in science, is similar to a hypothesis that we do in science. I am also a science teacher, and I do love my science as much as English. And so a prediction is an educated guess, and that's what it is. So when we predict something to happen, I always say it's an educated guess, and it has to be educated because it's using our thought, it's using our knowledge, it's using also inferencing as well. So we're going to predict what's going to happen in the future based on clues and knowledge. So do you see again why I wanted to spend a whole lesson on inferencing yesterday? Because inferencing, you use it in so many different aspects in English, and you also inference in so many of your other subjects as well. Okay, let's have a look at our text. Jenna was lying outside the sun. I'm busy smiling because my name is Jenna, but Miss Kun was lying outside the sun. She knew she should put some sunblock on, but the sun felt so good on her back that she did not want to move. She told herself that she would get the sunblock in 5 minutes. Within 3 minutes, Jenna had fallen asleep. That does sound like something I would do. But sunblock, always. It's something that I try to remember all the time. And with my very pale skin, I have to use a very strong sunblock, factor 50. And I've also, you can't see, but I've got freckles. And so, yeah, I've got very my skin is very fair and prone to getting burnt. Right. So here we've got a scenario, and the question that I have to pose to you is, what do you think will happen? What will happen next? And if I say what will happen next, what makes you think so? So again, we are needing to inference. So I want to read this again. And as I read it again, I want you to think what will happen next. And when you think about what will happen next, it's almost like if I then give you the second paragraph or the following sentence, what would the following sentence say without me presenting it to you? So that is what a prediction is. And you actually see it a lot. You do it a lot, especially either in comprehensions or even in creative writing in English, where you'll get a part of a sentence, and then it'll say, or the opening of a story, and then it'll say, finish off the story with what you think will happen next, kind of, right? So it's a very fun reading strategy, because again, it's getting you to think based on what you're currently reading now. Okay, so Jenna was lying outside in the sun. She knew she should put some sunblock on, but the sun felt so good on her back that she did not want to move. She told herself that she would get the sunblock in 5 minutes. Within 3 minutes, Jenna had fallen asleep. So what do you think will happen next? Let's see. You guessed it. Jenna will get a sunburn. Right, if you fall asleep in the sun, there is a very good chance you will get burnt. Okay, how do we know this? Because she was comfortable, because it said she was enjoying the sun on her back, and then she fell asleep. Right, and falling asleep in the sun, especially without sunblock, is never a good idea, because you are going to get burnt, and the sun is very harmful and dangerous onto your skin. Right, and the last one for today is called Summarize It. Now, this particular one, you are going to need a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper. And once we finish reading the text, I'm going to explain what to do. And that's when you're going to need to pause the video, do the activity, and then I'm going to reveal the answer. Okay, you have to pause it so you can try. Don't just wait for my answer, because then it defeats the purpose. So let's have a look at the text, and then I will show you the problem or the question. Okay. Giant river otters live in South America. Families of giant river otters live in dens that they dig into the banks of rivers and lakes. Mother river otters give birth to their babies in their dens. Baby river otters are called cubs. Cubs are born blind and helpless. They do not leave the den until they are about 2 months old. Okay, some interesting facts there. I didn't know much about otters. And so remember, it's always awesome to just learn something new. Right, so now this particular reading strategy, and this is why I say that I really and truly want you to pause the video, and I want you to do it yourself before I reveal the answer. You, again in English, summarizing is quite an important skill that you can do in all of your subjects, and summarizing techniques, particularly when you are preparing for tests or exams and you're going to summarize and make notes to help you study. And so this, as well as a reading strategy, is awesome. And if you're doing activities in English, in the English language subject itself, this particular strategy or this question will pop up quite often when you will be given a paragraph, and then you will be expected to then summarize the paragraph according to a certain criteria. So over here it says summarize this paragraph in 12 words or less. Now that's quite a skill to do. It's a matter of, let's pick out the most important aspects of the paragraph. What is the paragraph about? Okay, in 12 words or less. Are you ready? I want you to try it on your own first, and then I'm going to reveal the answer. Okay, I'm going to read it one more time. As I read it, maybe you can already start on your own. So giant river otters live in South America. Families of giant river otters live in dens that they dig into the banks of rivers and lakes. Mother river otters give birth to their babies in their dens. Baby river otters are called cubs. Cubs are born blind and helpless. They do not leave the den until they are about 2 months old. Right, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, I really do hope that you paused the video and you tried it on your own, Because the answer is as follows. If I had to summarize that text in 12 words or less, I would say, giant river otter cubs are born in dens in South America. And that is pretty much what that text is all about. It is not important to know that they are born blind and helpless. It is not important to know that they stay in the dens for 2 months. The main point of that particular paragraph is talking about the cubs of giant river otters. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 11 words. Right, so not too shabby. How did you do? I hope you did well. I'm sure you did. If not, try it again. Okay. Right. Grade 5s, I really enjoyed this lesson today, and I hope that you did as well. I know that I tend to get quite silly, but I think that it's important to have fun. It's important to have so much fun in learning and what you are doing. It's important to share stories. It's important to relate to what you're learning, because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to be that enthusiastic and confident about the subject. And so the more you enjoy what you are doing, the more you're going to be excited to learn. And learning and thinking and inferring is all, it's how we grow. And I think it's so important. But it was wonderful. And I will see you all tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. And for those of you that don't know, it is Earth Day today, so a very happy Earth Day. Be mindful of recycling today. Be mindful of switching off your lights. Be mindful of looking after our Earth, because we've only got one. And so enjoy your day. Hakuna Matata. Be kind to one another. Bye.